I've never known a love so steady. Even gold won't turn your tide. We flow together like an ocean, every low and every high.
Hey everybody, welcome to Mirror in the Stall. So today we are talking to Luke Gingerich. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Let everyone know what it is you actually do.
Sure. So, I am a horseman trainer, clinician, performer. I travel the country performing and teaching at expos and doing some of the night shows and performances in conjunction with the clinics there. And then I do a lot of private clinics. I specialize in the Liberty work. So most of my clinics are primarily focused towards the Liberty work and getting started with that. But then I also compete with my own horses in reining, range versatility, some of those disciplines. And I try to combine kind of both of those worlds, I guess you could say, with my own horses and then with my clients. I've been into the horses. I started riding, I was about 10 years old. So been into the horses for about 16 years now. And so that's just a very brief introduction. I'm sure we'll talk about that more as we go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfect. It's funny because I don't remember who I was talking to, and I had said something about the Liberty work, and I was like, that just like fascinates me because I do the round pen stuff, and I get to the point where like they want to stay with you, and I can do quite a bit with my horses, but I've never like actively went like, I'm gonna go try that in the big arena because I'm pretty sure it wouldn't work out. And somebody had me, oh, you know, all of those guys, they use like electric collars on their horses to get them like that. And I was like, everybody, like, I mean, like, is that just like a thing? I don't know. Is that like just something that like people think sometimes? I was like, really? And he's like, oh yeah, the guys with all the horses, they all use that. And I was like, and I was so like, well, that just took all like the coolness out of it. So is that something that's true, or is it like?
That's a good question. So I don't like to make sweeping generalizations. So I'm not going to say everything for anybody. I could say for me personally, absolutely not. I do not use that.
Right.
Does it happen? Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to deny that it doesn't happen in some cases. That's a tough one because it is. There's a lot, just like with any discipline, everything is not always as it seems, what you see as the finished product. And I think that's, important when you're seeking out help or when you're seeking out guidance or assistance. Make sure as much as you can do your research on finding out where are the values and ethics and priorities for that particular trainer. Yeah. So it is, there's a lot of different ways to get to what you're seeing as the end result. But yes, I do not use any of that, but it not saying it doesn't.
I should have asked him that before we came on here.
Yep.
For some reason, I mean, I watched some of your content and stuff, so I in my head was like, no, this is not, which is I think one of the reasons why I was like, I could reach out to you because that part does fascinate me. So I know in every discipline there's different levels of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that is either ethical or not, or whatever personally you find that way. I know it's different for everyone, right? So is the world. But for you, so what is it? How did you get started with that? Just the Liberty piece? Was that something that you started with, or is this something that like came about after you were focused on the reining and other stuff?
Yeah, so definitely did not start with it. I mean, it's something I've been interested in ever since I was a kid. I remember way back, my mom sitting on the couch as a little boy reading me storybooks of like, I think it was Blaze and Thunderbolt were the horses' names. And like we would go out to the pasture and call the horses, they come galloping across the pasture, just like in the movies, I'm like, that's what I want when I get a pony. And they finally gave in, got me a pony. I was like 10 years old, little mini. That was not the case. I mean, she was like, we'd fall off or she would get loose, run across the road, run off, she was bucket when it was not at all like that. So it's something I wanted to do, but that's certainly not how I started. Starting out, it was mostly just pleasure riding, trail riding. And then I got bought my own horse, first quarter horse when I was 15. And I found out kind of after the fact, she had some Western pleasure training, had been, so I got started at some local open shows with her, doing some Western pleasure trail, that kind of thing. not super competitively. And pretty quickly figured out that wasn't quite the route I wanted to go. And then when I really kind of started getting into the Liberty work, or kind of more moving that direction, was when shortly after I got my mare. Long story short, there was a family member that had bred a quarter horse gelding. Well, he was not a gelding when I got him, but anyway, a colt that I started working with as a, I worked with him a little bit as a yearling and then as a 2-year-old. And I was supposed to do some work with him, train him for them so they could sell him. And I get a little bit of the money. I was a young kid at that time, and it was just supposed to be a fun project. Well, fast forward, I have him for a year or two. We're really bonded at that point. He's turning out to be a lot of fun. I'm, liking where he's going, and I couldn't bring myself to let him go. So I ended up turning around and buying him from my uncle for a whole $400, which to me was a lot of money at the time. But he went on to, be very competitive, showing at a lot of the big expos across the country, the Quarter Horse Congress and the Freestyle Rings. That was kind of cool to see, taking completely, with him, he started a lot of the direction I am going in now, because he was not nearly as forgiving. And my mare had a lot of traditional training before I got her, I guess you could say. So she was just kind of like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Didn't have a lot of feedback. She's very forgiving, which is probably good, because I probably would have gotten hurt when I first started riding. But he came along and he's like, you're going to have to figure something else out, because that's not going to work. And so I had to look into some alternative methods. And so what I really first started getting into the Liberty work was back in 2015. I got connected with a horseman by the name of James Cooler. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He was a competitor at Road to the Horse, the big colt starting competition down in Kentucky. And I saw he did some Liberty work, and also was a bit more geared towards some of the performance end of things than a lot of, I felt like was either, it was really hard to find people that were doing some of the Liberty work at all. But if they were, that they were also interested in, competing or higher level, teaching the horse how to use himself athletically and that kind of thing, which is where both of my interests were. So anyway, he was based down Hilton Head Island. I'm up here near Columbus, Ohio. So long story short, didn't work for him to come up here and do some events. So I packed up my little horse and drove down in my 2-horse bumper pull trailer down, very long day of travel, and spent about a week with him, working with him down there. And he really helped me get started with just understanding some of the basic principles in the beginning. And of course, I didn't get to do a lot of follow-up after that because of the distance, a few lessons and clinics here and there, but I say he taught me just enough to make me dangerous, because I came home and I was hooked. I mean, the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And, at that point I was not doing this professionally. And so I just, spent a lot of time, I didn't even have an indoor arena. So I would just go out to the pasture and play with my horse, and it didn't go very well in the beginning. Sometimes I don't recommend starting this necessarily in a giant pasture. You're going to get pretty frustrated. Your horse is going to get frustrated because there's not going to be as much understanding, but you live and learn, right? But that's where I guess I would say the seed was planted. And then that's really, he's the only Liberty trainer I have gotten to work with really in person in any kind of depth. Most of it, other than a few other things here and there online and stuff, was a lot of trial and error. And so just going out there and playing with a lot of different things, figuring out what worked for me and my horse, what didn't work, because there's a lot that didn't work, and kind of going from there, I guess is how I would say I got started in this direction. And then I think actually your question was about maybe also with the reining, which came first. They kind of all happened at the same time, I guess you could say. As I was working on that, I was also working on getting into the reining more as well. And so it kind of went side by side, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I feel like, part of it, the performance stuff, you see those horses that perform and they're obedient and they do their job. And then you see the horses that perform, but you can tell they're really connected with whoever's with them. And there's something extra about it. So I think connecting at a deeper level by doing the liberty work, and then taking them into a situation where you're pushing them, it's a little bit more stressful. Like that piece, I feel like makes the performance stuff better.
From a mental standpoint, specifically mental and emotional as far as the connection, but then what I'm really enjoying right now is trying to see how much can I, because that's huge, right? That's where everything starts. But then I'm trying to see how can I not only have that, but how can I actually teach my horses how to use themselves on the ground in more of a performance or competitive or athletic way, before they've got us on their backs trying to balance as well. And then when I get on their backs, not only does the connection and the mental part transfer over, but also that muscle memory. So what they're getting reinforced for on the ground, but then also just literally the muscle memory transfers over. It's just, I really and it goes both ways, of course, you know, like with my gelding Rio that I started with, he was, you know, I did some of the more athletic maneuvers under saddle first, and then started doing those on the ground. For example, like the flying lead change at Liberty. That was a big question I got, was people would be like, can you do that on the ground first, or they learn under saddle? I was like, well, he learned under saddle, but I'm pretty sure I can do it the other way. So of course, knowing myself, I had to go out and prove it. So I, with my filly mare now, 4-year-old mare that I have, Chloe, I try to do everything kind of the other way around in a bit. So starting things on the ground, teaching her the flying lead, changing a lot of that collection and lateral work on the ground, and then going over into saddle, and then it happened more quickly under saddle. So it's really, even this much farther along, when I've been doing this for a while, I'll notice if I really work on something more on the ground, I'll get in the saddle and I'll feel the difference in the saddle. Or maybe I'll work on something more in the saddle, I'll get on the ground and I feel it there. So I think it goes both ways. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Chloe is the one that, she's a Palomino. I think I saw a video, and you have not actually ridden her with a bridle yet, right? Did I make that up?
No. Yes, no, you did not make that up. Okay. Technically, she has worn a bridle because I was planning. So it was just a bit of a personal goal for me, was to see if I could start her completely at Liberty. So nothing but a neck rope and the Liberty whips or sticks to guide her from the cues that she knows on the ground, right? And I was like, do it for a few rides or a week or whatever, and then I'll put the bridle on and everything will be good to go. Well, I thought it would, I figured obviously I had a certain level of trust in her, just try it from the beginning. I thought it'd go okay. But I honestly had no idea how far we'd be able to take it. I mean, she completely blew me away. Within about a week of riding, she was doing walk, trot, canter, lateral work, back up, beginning of the, basic reining spin, a lot of that stuff, and carrying herself. If you look at the way she was carrying herself, she looked like a horse with way more training than what she had in her saddle, but she had the training on the ground, and that was carrying itself over, how she was carrying herself. And so it was just kind of like a snowball effect. The longer I went, I was like, well, I didn't expect that. So what if I go a little longer? Maybe we can do this. And it just kind of kept building. And so when I say she wore a bridle, I had started just putting a bridle on her with no reins, just so you used to the bit and everything. So I tried to introduce all of that gradually. And then when I figured out this is going to be a longer journey, I just forgot about the bridle. So she does not know what reins mean. If I would put a bridle and a bit and reins on her and I would pull on the bit, she would have no idea what that means. So she's never been, my goal was, what can I accomplish without physically manipulating or forcing her face, basically, right? So the neck rope does bring refinement, because there's a lot of cues with a lot of the things I'm doing with her now, but she does not know, her face has not been manipulated. And that's been, fast forward, that was in the fall of 2019 when I started riding her. So she's got, I think, close to 200 rides now. And here we are about not quite a year and a half later. And I keep thinking I'm going to start putting a bridle, and then I just push myself back a little farther, because it's just fun to see. She's now, doing pretty high level reining slides, spins, working on lead changes, a lot of that stuff. But I do want to compete with her. So that's kind of my struggle right now, because you kind of need a bridle to compete, right? And so that remains to be seen. That's kind of a day by day thing. But yes, that you did not make that up.
I was like, well, I clearly should have paid closer attention. I was like, I hope this is right. Pretty sure. Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing for people to hear and like see someone do, because they really do fall back on in every discipline, especially I think English disciplines, because you're already in a space where you're riding with contact. Because I have a lot of dressage clients, I have a lot of different, you know, backgrounds, but I feel like when you are already riding with that contact, it's way easier to cheat because you're already there. And then the horses get really strong, and then they get really fit, and then they get really resentful, and then you're dealing with this incredibly athletic, gigantic warm blood that's like, I don't have to listen to you. And so the importance of them understanding that all of that stuff can happen if there's clear understanding of what you want. And I think the horses, when they understand how to carry themselves properly, they want to, because it feels better.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You know, I don't ride bridleless just to say, oh, that's cool, I don't have a bridle on my horse's face. If I don't feel like I have the, you know, with her, the way I approached it, I did that body control and posture training and how to use herself on the ground. And I was able to keep carrying that over with riding. So I stayed bridleless. But if I would get to a point, you know, I never want to come across as I'm anti-tack or anti-bit or anti-spur, any of that, because I'm not. I think used correctly is completely ethical and very beneficial in a lot of situations. But if I get to a point where I don't, maybe I'm not able to help the horse use themselves how I want to, I have no problems going to the bridle, right? But I do think it's a great way to isolate your cues, see how accurate you're being with all of your aids, not just your hands, and just see how how specific and how subtle can you be with some of those aids that maybe don't get used quite as much.
Yeah, that's yeah, I just think it's such a powerful thing for people to understand, because I think a lot of them go, yeah, well, you can't do this and this without a bridle. And it's like, well, actually, it kind of seems like, yes, that's the point. The point is you're supposed to be, for me, it's like seat, leg, and then if they need backup or they need to understand clearer, then you pick up your hands, when it's usually like the first thing. It's like, so it's so human of us to look down and go, this is what we have, you know, and everything else is not right in your line of vision.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. For the Liberty stuff, so what does that look like when you start that out? So for me, what I use the round pen for is definitely not that in depth, right? Like I go to the round pen, I just check in with them, make sure they're responsive, you know, that we can have that connection, that they can focus, everything is kind of balanced out. And then I used to spend a lot more time there when I started horses, but now I use it here and there intermittently for stuff. So what does that look like when someone says, I have this horse and I want to do Liberty with it? Like, is there like a process that you can kind of explain, or is that like way too? Is that way too
yes
big?
And no. Yes and
Okay.
no. So there is a very in-depth process. Yes, there is. It's a lot more, especially if you want, you know, so with Liberty work, I try to lay the preface, I guess you could say, in my clinics of, just like with any discipline, there's different styles of Liberty work. Okay. It's not like Liberty work is Liberty work is Liberty work across the board. Everything's the same. You know, sometimes people think just because their horse has had some level of Liberty training 6 months ago with somebody else, I can come in there and just do the same thing. It's not, it's all about that communication and how everything works together. And so you have, I like to think of, you know, one end of the spectrum, you have kind of what I think of as like the flamboyant, fiery movie horse mentality Liberty work, right? If you know what I'm saying. And then you have the other end of the spectrum is a lot more refined and technical and accurate, and maybe even a bit more disciplined, I guess you could say, right? And I try to combine both. I would say I would tend to be more towards the latter that I just described, but of course I want to absolutely channel that play drive and that fire and that spirit and personality in my horses, but then also build mental and physical discipline and see how technical I can get it, because admittedly I'm a very detail oriented person. I love detail and refinement and all of that. So when we're going to start out, generally I will start even just on a halter and lead rope, not always in a round pen. If I'm working with a client, with somebody else and their horse. With some of my horses, I do a lot more of it Offline, more from the beginning, in a round pen or a smaller area, just as a personal challenge. There's just so much less margin for error when you're doing it that way. And so if you're brand new and your horse is brand new and you're just throwing everything away and starting like that, that's setting you up for a lot of frustration on both of your ends, right? And again, I love Liberty work, but I never want to, just because being at Liberty is not necessarily kinder or more helpful or less stressful for your horse than giving them some support, is my personal opinion, right? So I don't want to come across as that's just always the answer, okay? If I have a horse that is struggling and I see that they would really benefit from just putting that halter on and showing them what I'm asking for, I don't want to be afraid to do that, okay? Should not feel like a failure or a, but if you're putting that halter on to make things happen and force it through, that's a very different approach than for guidance, right? So in the beginning, what I want to start from, and this can be done generally offline, but just get kind of that baseline of connection, focus, and relaxation. I want to be able to get to what, when I'm teaching a clinic, day one, first thing, first of all, make sure my horse is not running over the top of me, because sometimes that's what's happening. Clinics, whether they're pushy or nervous and anxious and they don't feel that support from the person. And then so they can stand at the end of a slack line, relaxed and focused and engaged on me. And so, basically with that, I'll try to, again, just like you said, when you're riding, people want to grab the reins, right? Immediately. We're control freaks by nature, I like to think. And we want to, rather than grab for that lead rope, I try to redirect with my body language or then my voice and my verbal communication, and then finally go to physical. And so I'll redirect. If they're distracted one way, I'll send my energy the other way. So I'll send my energy, then I'll send my body, then I'll use my voice, and then I'll create some energy with my whip in my hand, which is this extension of my body. Then I'll finally go to the rope if I absolutely need to at the end, right? And go through that sequence of applying those cues and communication to where they start to notice a simple tip of my head or a shift of my weight, and they come back. So I'm starting to let them know every time their focus or awareness drifts, I'm aware of that, and I'm going to do something more interesting. And I think that gives my horses more confidence in me because they know I'm aware of the situation. If I'm standing there, my mind is going in a million directions. I'm worried about what the people watching are thinking, what my trainer's thinking, what I'm going to, what I'm doing at school tomorrow or what I'm doing at work tomorrow. They don't feel a lot of that support. So just getting mentally present with them is one of the biggest things I try to start with, and getting them present with me. And then building from there, one of the first things I'll do as well then is actually teach my horse a back up away from me cue, right? Which again sounds a little counterintuitive, but with Liberty, we think a lot of drawing the horses in, bringing them to us, bringing them close, and that's all great, but I want to stay safe. And as they start to figure out that what we call draw, or what we call that recall, they're like, wow, where has this been all my life? It's really fun for them, and they can get really enthusiastic and playful. And I want that playfulness, but I'm not a 1,200-pound horse, okay? And so I want to make sure if they get a little overexcited, or maybe they do get a little bit aggressive, or maybe as they're trying to figure out, what does this mean? Does this mean I can chase you? Does this mean, I just want to make sure I have that default to go back, standing in front, raise my body and core, raise my whips if I need to, and create a very clear backup cue to build that personal energy bubble that I call it. It's not this whole thing of you can never come in close to me. I just want to be able to keep that conversation open. Right. And then from there, I go to some lateral exercises, teaching my horse how to move each part of their body, their shoulder, their rib cage, their hind quarter, again, off of my body language. And then I do use whips. I use 2 whips actually as an extension of my arms, because I can guide them better. So just like when I'm riding, I use 2 legs, I use 2 reins. On the ground, I use 2 whips. I can guide better, and I can be more refined as we go further along. But basically, I'll work on getting understanding for lateral movements on the ground, and softening exercises to get them starting. A lot of horses I start out with are very tense and rigid through their body. And I find getting them more focused tends to help them relax, but then also helping get rid of some of the physical tension comes back and helps the mind. I think it goes both ways. And so that's what I'll kind of move into. And then once we have some of those lateral exercises, then I will go into that draw and that recall. That's the fun one that everybody wants to get to. But I want to make sure, like I said, I have the backup and the lateral, so that let's say they're coming to me really quickly, and I don't want to shut them down and say, don't, right? Because then they get confused. I can incorporate some lateral to channel that energy. And that's like where the start of a Liberty Circle comes from, is when I can move them laterally with my body or with my arms, and incorporate that draw with me. So that draw can come from, in the beginning, like then getting to what you're talking about, like in the round pen, where basically in the beginning, it's if they want to disconnect or leave me, I'll ask them to move their feet. And it is not mindlessly chasing them in circles to tire them out. That's not at all what my goal is. Like some people may be used to with round pen work. Okay, I'm trying to engage, get them to think about where their feet are, and then get them to start thinking about bringing their feet back to me with their mind. And so if they're going around there, a lot of direction changes to the inside, and I start releasing pressure when they turn in and bring their focus to me. And so just like they use pressure on each other in a herd situation, they always seek the release of that pressure. Okay. And so I'm going to keep playing with that energy balance or pressure and release balance until they start figuring out this little game. Every time I bring my focus closer to him, he releases, and it gets peaceful and quiet. And we start building that until, as I retreat, they start to draw off of that fence and they start to come in towards me. That's like the very beginning. And then I gradually, of course, start to ask for a little bit more when they come into me, but always coming back in that rest and relaxation when they're with me, so they can get that reward, conserve energy like they naturally want to do. And that builds a lot of draw and desire and trust in those beginning stages. I don't know how in depth you want me to go on this, because I can get carried away easily, but I do start, that's very effective in the beginning. But then as I start wanting to get more advanced, because what I'm doing there is I'm basically saying, if you want to come engage with me and hang out here, it's going to be easier. If you want to disconnect, it's going to be more work. Just like us, they tend to choose easier options. But then as I'm getting farther along, I personally like to see how, I'm always pushing my limits, right? And so that means I'm trying to push my horse's limits in a fair way. And so when we get to some of those higher difficulty things, you lose, it's not easy to do a really tight collected canter circle around me. It's not easy to do literally a dressage canter pirouette right around me or right in front of me. It's not easy to do a canter half pass or 10 flying lead changes in a row. It's not easy to rear up on your back legs and walk 10 feet. Like that's all a lot harder generally than taking off and just trotting around the round pen. And so to increase that motivation as I start getting farther along, I add in a lot more positive reinforcement or clicker training, which I'm guessing you're familiar with. Yeah. And a lot of people, it's becoming more well known, but a lot of people, it's still kind of a new concept, right? But basically, I can be more accurate with the clicker training and the positive reinforcement. And I can add that extra degree of motivation to where not only do we eventually get to stop and rest and hang out, but we also, as they start to offer more effort, they seek that bridge signal or the click, and then the food reward. The other thing I want to just quick mention there is the other thing that's really, I think maybe gets overlooked is as you get to those higher levels, it's not just about completely stopping and standing or just just dishing out the treats. It's that literally your energy just starts to sync up, and it does become a pleasant place to be while you're doing something, while you're together, right? Which I'm sure you're familiar with too. But as we start getting more on the same wavelength, and that's where a lot of the mirroring work comes into play for me when I try to actually physically mirror their body movements, their stride, their angle, their movement. That's what they want to feel when they're in a herd situation, is that synchronizing. And that itself can become reinforcing for them because they feel the synchronizing, and they feel that I just think about it as like, as that peace and quiet, that calm between when there's not actually as much direct pressure going on.
Right.
Okay. I'll
No, I love it. Cause you're in like that flow space with them.
yes. Yep.
Yeah. You feel it. Like I was talking about people and their relationships with their horses and how most people show up at the barn and they're going, okay, we're going to do this today. No, you don't have a say in it. Most of the stuff that horses do aren't something that they find enjoyable for the most part. You know, it's the human's agenda. People buy the horse to make them feel better. And when that starts to fall apart, they get frustrated. And I always tell them, you have to look at it like, is your horse getting outside time with like a relationship? Like you do your own thing sometimes, they get to do their own thing. Like the other quarter of the time, you guys do what they want to do, which is just hanging out. And then the other time you get to do what you want to do. Like if you break that up, they find that balance and they don't mind doing what your agenda says, but horses lack that so much. And I feel like when they get to do something that you're both enjoying, because there's that connection and then that flow, that it is a rewarding thing. It's like your clicker training with dopamine. They're still getting the reward. It's just a chemical reward, right?
Yeah.
Like
agenda is big. I'm glad you brought that up. Agenda that's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, so when you're talking about doing this, especially the higher level stuff, because I just watch it and I'm like, I don't know, that just like blows my mind. So maybe I should come to a clinic and like watch this. But in my head, I'm like, I don't even understand. Like it's just so far out of my brain capacity. And I am really connected with my horses. And, you know, like the stuff that I do with mine, it's like I can work other horses off of them. Like they're super broke, like, you know, but then I think of, if I turned him loose and was like, okay, we're going to do this. So he'd be like, So I have to look at it like, and when I bring people into the round pen, I just feel like when people's emotional state, when you come, like even just me thinking that, right? Like me going, there's no way I could do that. Then obviously from that place, there's no way I could do that. Like
exactly.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I say that all the time at clinics. I'll do something with a horse. I'll get something started and I'll say, get ready to try it. Well, I'm going to screw it up. I'm like, wait. I'm not going to give you the lead rope right now then. Because if you come up with that mindset, you're probably going to get exactly what you're expecting.
Right.
Now, I'm on the flip side. I also don't agree with, well, if you just think positive thoughts, it's all going to be perfect. No, it's not. This is real life. Like you have to put the work in. You have to put practice in. But I agree completely. Your mindset when you approach the situation makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I wonder how much, so I just had an interview with Susan Fay, and she is someone who wrote that book, and it's like hot right now. Everyone's like buying the book. And we talked a lot about how having that clear picture in your head of what you want really changes. And I've had clients out here like, I just did that thing. Like, it's just like, it's hilarious. But I'm like, we do that all the time. You know, you're always expecting your horse to either push on your left leg because it always does it. So you're already doing the thing, you're just doing it and you're not working it for you, you're working it against you. So how much of that do you think you do either consciously or unconsciously? Are you like really clear on what you're about to get? And that helps that communication get cleared up. Yes,
that's a great point to bring up. I like that you said consciously or unconsciously, because a lot of times it's not necessarily consciously until I go back and like I get asked the question. I'm like, actually, I have a very clear, you know, what do I want? What kind of energy or expression do I want them to bring to the table? And what kind of energy do I have to put into it? Because if I get in a session where I start to get picky or I start to get frustrated, it's generally I project that, they project it back, and it keeps going downhill. Like it versus if I get in a session where I start to look at, I'm picturing the best possible intention on their part, rather than he's just not trying hard enough, rather than he's struggling a little bit, but he gave some effort there. I like that. What can I go with that? And you know what? At the end of the session, some of them might look really similar, but I feel totally different at the end of the session when I take, you know, the second approach of trying to picture the best possible intention or effort from them, right? That's kind of from the mental standpoint. And when I say I feel, I know they feel better too at the end of that. But then also the physical part of it as well. Like literally, let's say we're going to do a simple, it's kind of similar to a traditional, what they call like a hindquarter yield, except when I'm working on it, I'm looking at a lot more than just the hindquarter. I'm looking at the shoulder, rib cage, hindquarter. So personally, I call it boomerang yield. But anyway, it's asking the horse to soften their body in kind of that C-shaped bend from their nose through their rib cage back to their tail, and yield around me, and a bit of a leg yield on a circle is one of the big foundational pieces to liberty circles and some of that and that self carriage and that stuff. And so somebody will go in there, and so I mean sometimes I'll barely be done explaining it, and they're grabbing the rope and the whip and they're charging, and I'm like, wait a minute, do you even know what you're expecting to happen here, right? If you can't take a couple seconds and stand here, picture where it's going to be going before you go in. Your horse is for sure going to have no clue where to go if you don't know. And so if you're jumping in there, so for example, if I'm standing here and my horse is over here and I want them to yield around this direction, if I don't have that mental picture of where I want them to go, I just come in here and now my focus is here, and they wonder why their horse is falling in, pushing into them and getting stuck. And I'm saying, because your mental picture or your energy or your focus is not, it's where you are or where they are rather than where you want them to be. I think that's kind of what you were asking with that. And so, yeah, that can be anything as simple or basic as beginning there on the ground. That can be as advanced as ground tying my horse hundreds of feet away from me in the pasture, running away from them, turning around and visualizing them closing that gap, bringing that energy back to me. Or opposite, I can be a great distance away, visualize that I want their feet to move backwards, and send that energy out and move them away from me. And then you can take that under the saddle and picture where you want their body going. But yeah, I think glad you brought that one up, because I think that's a big part of the liberty work, but any kind of work with horses for sure.
Yeah. And after I talked to her, she kept saying, show them how it feels. And I was like, she's like, feel how you want them to feel. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like thinking about all the years I've been training, and in the groundwork, when I'm doing it, I feel like I'm riding the horse while I'm doing the groundwork. Like I know when I'm looking at what it feels like if I was riding, and I didn't even consciously realize that when I'm softening them and I'm going, what do you want when you ride? You wouldn't want that when you would ride. So, fix it here. And even yesterday, I was like, what does it feel like to ride that? And my client was like, it looks like a lot of work. She's a big old warm blood. Using herself. And I was like, well, can you even visualize your body being that elastic and being that supple to stay connected with him? And she was like, no. And I was like, well, how the hell do you ever think you're going to be able to do it once you're on the back? Right. But so it's like, I didn't realize that, yeah, when I'm doing that, I'm feeling what I want. And so when you talk about like that connection, when, you're doing the high level stuff and they're enjoying it as much as you are, I think that goes the same as, them picking up on what we're experiencing and going, does it feel safe? Does it feel nice to be around that? Or I explained it yesterday, like static electricity. I feel like when our brains are 90 miles an hour and we're everywhere, but when we're working with our horse, I think it's because I hate static electricity. Like I hate the clothes and they come out of the dryer and they shock me like, and I'm like, you're just like, you cringe to be around it. And I feel like so many people don't understand when their brain is going, that's what it feels like to the horses. So how do you have a practice? Do you have something that you're aware of that you do where you're like, I know if I'm in a place where like my human life stuff is happening and it's big and everyone has like their stuff and I've got to go teach this clinic or I have to go perform and I need to be able to separate what's happening out there from my horse and what we're going to do. Do you have something that you consciously do, or is it something that you can just automatically like shut down?
That's a good question. Bit of a tricky answer. That's one of the, that might be one of the few things that has come a bit more naturally for me, I guess you could say, because a lot of this has not come naturally for me. I just really put a lot of work into learning how to, accomplish some of these things. But I think it goes along a little bit with how how serious and detail oriented and intense I am just as my personality. And so when I do something, I want to do it right. Like if I don't want to do 10 things and put a you know, a tenth of my energy into each thing. And so when people are like, what do you do outside of horses? I'm like,
A what?
what is another life? You know, like what's that? But now, and I think, you know, some of our greatest strengths can also be our biggest weaknesses. So I'm not saying that that's just always great. You know, for example, I get so serious and so intense and so goal oriented, and my horses are like, bro, chill out a little bit. Like, we don't have to get this today, right now. You know, we're going to work towards it. And so I have to back off a little bit with that. But I think for me, when I get in there, maybe I don't always necessarily, you know, have a set number of things we have to get done that day, but I tend to really immerse myself in whatever I'm doing. And so I think for me, it does come a little bit more naturally, and it's self-rewarding, I guess I would say, because the more I do it, some of my, you know, best sessions with my horses or rides or whatever, is when I get done and I'm like, wow, for like that half hour or hour, everything else didn't exist. Maybe I'm anxious and I'm worried about something coming up and I got a lot on my mind and my chest is tight, and I get done riding, I'm like, I can breathe again. Where'd that, you know? And then I realize what happens when I do become fully present, and so that, I guess, motivates me to let more of that go. Does that make sense at all?
That totally makes sense. Like,
okay,
because you're bringing yourself into the present moment and only focusing on what you've got in front of you, then you don't bring in your stuff to them. I also think, I think that's personality type, and also when you are doing it as a profession, sometimes I think what people forget is when it's your passion and your profession, you spent enough time figuring out what doesn't work, and you love it so much that you're willing to continue to go. Like I was saying before, there was times when in my training where I was like I should probably just go like get a job at Starbucks or something. Like, this isn't really going that well. Like, I don't know how to fix this horse. I don't know how to deal with this client. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But because I feel like sometimes it's in your DNA to do the work you do, that you just keep going and you figure that stuff out as you go. So, yeah. So, I mean, I feel like for people that own horses, it's a different thing. They're passionate about it. They love it, but they have so much else going on too. And that's just this little chunk of time that they spend with them.
And you have to be, you have to be, and I know there's a lot, everybody has different situations, but in my opinion, you have to be willing to sacrifice a certain amount of other things if you really want. It's just like anything. It's not just horses, but you know, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up as a kid. You know, I didn't, you know, because I wasn't out there partying every night. I wasn't out there, you know, whatever. You can't have it all, in my opinion. And so, no, it doesn't just happen. It's not just because it's easy, but it's because how important is it to you? How much do you want it? And how willing are you to put in those late nights, those early mornings, those when you don't. Do I always feel like going out there working with my horses to this day? Absolutely not. I got a million things to do. I've got things that, you know, I could tell myself are more important, or it's cold, or it's, you know, we're doing the same thing, because that's what good horse training is, in my opinion, is a lot of repetition, same thing. But I know I'm not going to get to the things I want to get to, and I'm not going to build that relationship if I don't put in the day after day after day, even if it's not easy or always fun or always glamorous.
Yeah. So, how is it for you to go out and do like those performances with like all the people and like that same, it's like, whoa, that like blows my mind. Like, I mean, I have a really easy time talking to people. Like, I can public speak, like I can do all the things. Like, that stuff never really has bothered me, but the idea of going out with like all the people and then like the lights and then you're the only one. And I guess if you're a reiner, that's kind of what you guys do anyways, right? But how is that? Do you just go into that mode and then that's an easy thing for you to do naturally? Or is it something that in the beginning you were like, what the hell am I doing? Like, was there any of that in the beginning of that?
Yes, absolutely. when you say, is it just easy to come naturally? They could not be farther from the actual, how it was for me. So like, I actually, well, I didn't have any of it. So you said public speaking is easy for you, but the performing, all of that was like the furthest thing. It freaked me out completely. Like I had absolutely no desire. Public speaking terrified me, performing, being in the spotlight, extra attention like that, all of it. Like if you would have tried to make me do something outside of horses that involve that, don't even waste your time. And so it was a huge, and again, it kind of comes back to how bad do you want it? So, I had a really big goal. I saw some of the, a few different horsemen that would do some of the liberty stuff or the bridleless stuff. And I like the bridleless reining or the freestyle reining, some of that stuff. And I really loved what I saw with that. And I wanted to be able to, I think it comes down to a little bit of, as much as it freaked me out, I am also very personally competitive. I'm not very, I would not say I'm super competitive against far as I want to go beat that person. I'll go beat that person. But for myself, I'm trying to always push myself. And so if I set a goal, I don't like if I don't meet my goal, right? If I haven't done everything I can meet it. And so no, in the beginning, it was absolutely terrifying for me. So like I tried to do a little bit of some smaller shows, even just showing my horse just in a regular horse show. That was nerve-wracking for me. And then, a few smaller demos. But no, and it was, let's say, so the first big public performance I had would have been Quarter Horse Congress, the freestyle reining, back in 2016. And that was, you were like, what the heck am I doing here? That was that morning, the morning of so you have a rehearsal Saturday morning before the performance Saturday night. And I had no real trainer helping me. I was trying to wing it. I had watched some training videos. I had some friends that were helping me, but which later I'm like, how did I think I was going to do that? And we went out there for the rehearsal and it was a disaster. Like, not like dangerous. My horse was like, we were going to die, but it was like, from a technical standpoint, or I was all worked out. My horse was not relaxed. He was not doing the maneuvers correctly. And I just about had a breakdown. Like I was, why am I here? What do I think I'm doing? Like it was not at all. And actually, that's kind of a long story. That was the first time I actually showed bridleless, was that night, which was not the plan when I went into rehearsal that morning. And my friends were like, they could see what was going on to a certain extent. They could see I was completely over tense, overreacting, micromanaging my horse, trying to make things happen. And long story short, we were able to get some open arena time in the show pen. And so I went back into practice. They're like, just take the bridle off and just school, just try it. And I'm like, no, they're like, try it. And finally I gave in. And was it perfect? Of course not. But my horse relaxed, I relaxed, and we just kind of got on the same wavelength. Now, I'm not just saying, if something's not going well, take your bridle off, folks. You'll be good to go. Please don't. I'm not saying that at all. We've done a lot of work leading up to that, right? But it wasn't even so much about the bridle. It was about what it changed in me, because I had to feel more and try to be a bit more of a team member versus micromanaging so much, and if that makes sense. So anyway, that's to answer your question, it was a mess. It was terrifying. It was a mess. We went in there, we got through the pattern, we didn't get disqualified. That was good. I think we actually played third place or something. But to me, the end placing is not what primarily matters. For me, I went in there, I felt like I kind of fell apart. My horse didn't fall apart, but we didn't do great on the maneuvers. Again, it's fine. In hindsight, we all have to start somewhere. And so it was absolutely a learning process from there. And to me, it all comes back to, I think you mentioned earlier, I'm not sure, about some of the things that, people will do or work through or acknowledge for their horse. Like if they're doing it, they won't necessarily do it for themselves, or they won't do it for somebody else, they'll do it for their horse, right? And so if I had a horse in there with me, I was able to start overcoming some of that. But it was a big, even when I could get to where maybe I didn't feel like we were completely falling apart doing it, it was, I mean, I would get out of the pen and I'm like, what just happened? You know, like I was so in my head, I could hardly enjoy the performance because there's just, I mean, you've got the pattern, the music, your horse, the crowd, you know, everything you're trying to keep track of. And I was hard to even actually enjoy what I was doing because I wasn't even present really, totally. And so the more I'm able to do it, the more I'm able to start, and it's hard for anybody when you're under pressure or when you're being watched. But then when you're doing it professionally, in my opinion, you have expectations, you have bills to pay, you know, you know what I'm saying? Like as far as what you're expected to, you know, and you have to somehow let go of those expectations when you go in the ring. This is the horse I have right now. This is what we've done. We're gonna have to, it is what it is, right? You can't make things happen in there. But as I got farther along, I was able to start enjoying a little bit, just being like, look, like to me, what started changing a little bit for me was instead of feeling all of that pressure or focusing so much on the people watching or the people paying me to be there, just kind of switching to being more of a, how thankful I was to be there with my horse, being able to showcase what we've worked so hard for together, realizing how few people ever get that opportunity, and how much fun this is. Like, I mean, how cool is it to be in a dark arena, my favorite music playing, got the spotlights. Spotlights kind of help because you can't see everybody. You can just see your horse there. That they offer a lot of challenges too, but that kind of helps with that. And so, you know, just for example, one of my first big night show performances, I remember, you know, tons of prep work, all of that going into that. And we're out there and it's just almost like this moment frozen in time a little bit for me where like we're in the center of the pen. We're just doing a simple little livery circle, nothing earth shattering, nothing as exciting as maybe some of the stuff people like to see. And I'm just like, wow, this is really us right here. Like it's just me and you, bud. This was with Rio at the time, my gelding. And just being able to appreciate it and appreciate how much he was trying, because that is, like you said, it's so hard, or it can be very challenging for them to, you think it's pressure on us. We know what we're doing. We decided to do it. And, you know, they don't, you know, they didn't sign up for that necessarily. And for them to being able to adjust that much and put that effort into trusting me enough and connecting and following my guidance. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but I hope that answers your question a little bit.
No, that's perfect. I get anxiety you just talking about like prepping and like and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out. You know, I'm like, wow.
Yep. Been there, done that.
So for you now, when you do it, is it much different? Is it easier now, or is it just, I mean, I hear people say, like, I've talked to a couple of people that do big clinics and do performances and stuff, and they're like, no, I still have to go like throw up in the bathroom before I go. I still do it and I'm better at it when I'm out there, but it's still every time it doesn't, for some people they're like, no, it's way easier now. And some people are like, nope, same, still same as the first day, you know? How is it for you? Is it different now, or is it eased up a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would not say it's all just piece of cake now, walk in the park. Is it like the first day? No, thank God, because I probably wouldn't still be doing it. And so does it get better? Yes, but absolutely. I still have to mentally prep myself and try to kind of consciously let go of some of those expectations. And you know, like, in my opinion, if you go in there and you just don't feel anything, I don't know how much, I'm not trying to judge anybody who says it's easy, you know, but if you don't have any level of, you know, tension is not always a bad thing, I would say, depending what kind of tension, right? Like if you know, if you don't get nervous at all, because I've talked to people too that are very successful, they've done this a lot more than me. They're like, yeah, they're like, if you don't feel anything, if you're not nervous at all, you probably don't care that much, right? Like if I go out there and I'm like, well, it'll be what it'll be. I mean, I don't care. I probably haven't put that much, you know, as hard as I've worked to get there, and whether that's I'm trying to compete for a placing, whether I'm trying to perform for people that are paying to watch, or whether I'm just trying to go out there and put to the test what I've done with my own horses, and see where it can get us. If I don't, if I don't have some level of nervousness or at least anticipation about it, I would question how much I care. One thing that I have been told that has helped me a bit is starting to try to channel that nervousness into excitement. Right. So like I've been told how what you physically feel when you're nervous or anxious versus excited can almost physiologically feel like the same thing. Right. And so rather than sitting there like, oh my goodness, we're gonna die, it's gonna go okay, and it's like, yeah, all right, we're trying to get myself, not like crazy, like I want to still bring that level of calm for my horse, but kind of, again, kind of bring that thankful anticipation, excited energy to it a little bit, to change my mindset a little bit tends to help me. Yeah, and I have heard that is physiologically the same thing, right? It's the story you're telling yourself about the sensations you're experiencing in your body, and you can either make it like, what am I doing, or like, yay, I'm so excited about what I'm doing. So yeah, I totally feel all of that. So we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up, but if people want to work with you, I know you said you have a coaching program, you have clinics, where can they find all the information about what you're doing right now? Yes, so I do, you can check out my website, www.gingerichhorsemanship.com. And then I'm very active on social media. So Facebook, Luke Gingerich Horsemanship, or my personal page, Luke Gingerich, or then Instagram, also Luke Gingerich Horsemanship. And then, yes, I do have an extensive online coaching platform where I, have over 300 in-depth training videos where I go through, like you were talking about, the very beginning stages of this Liberty stuff, all the way up to this advanced, body control, posture training, collection, more of the athletic performance side of things. And then I'm right in the process of working on launching a new platform that then because I ride my horses, I don't just do Liberty all day, right? And so launching a new platform that shows how I transfer the Liberty work into the riding aspect, specifically the bridleless and performance or competitive bridleless work. But then there's going to be a variety of things mixing with that as well. So all of that can be found on my website, as well as all the contact information there. That's the best way to do that.
Cool. I'll put it all in the show notes. And then, to wrap up, I always want to check in with you guys and make sure if there's anything that you wanted to say that you feel like, oh, that came up, I want to make sure you guys feel complete. So if there's anything like that, now's the time.
Now's the time. Not necessarily, other than I might just, do the classic lead with a quote, right? One of my favorite quotes. And it kind of goes in conjunction with what a lot of people have found out of what I do is through my freestyles or my performances. And so back when, we used to be able to do that before everything started closing down, was back in, I think it was end of 2018 and then 2019 when I was doing my Imagine Dragons, Believer, and Whatever It Takes theme performance with my gelding. And one of my favorite quotes is, I think it's John Aseraf. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but it's, if you're interested, you'll do what's convenient. If you're committed, you'll do whatever it takes. So that's kind of my personal motto a little bit, because this stuff is not easy. It's not, it does take time. It is hard work, but it's so rewarding if you put it in the work. So that's my quote, I guess I'll leave with.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was fun. It was fun getting to know you.
Awesome. You as well. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, maybe if you come to California, because I can't go to Ohio because it's cold.
No, you do not want to come here right now.
Come out here and you can do a clinic. I don't want to go out there.
We had another big snowstorm last night. We got more coming later this week. I'm so over it, but I would love to come to California. So I might make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Have a good rest of your day then.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.